I still remember that moment like it happened yesterday. A calm Sunday afternoon, sunlight dancing across the lake, and me, Ethan Peterson, just settling into a chair after flipping the first rib on my brand new BBQ grill. Nobody could have guessed that a simple backyard cookout would be the match that lit a wildfire. 3 minutes after the smell of sizzling ribs drifted through the trees, the sirens began. Loud. Jarring. A police cruiser screeched to a stop in front of my cabin. The officer stepped out and approached slowly. "Sir, we received a 911 call about an illegal fire and possibly hazardous smoke." I blinked. "You've got to be kidding. That's beef." I pointed at the grill. The officer looked at the grill, then past me, toward the end of the street where a woman in a black blazer stood with her arms crossed and a look that could slice granite. "Karen, the HOA president," the officer muttered, almost apologetically. She marched up, eyes burning with authority. "We have strict air quality and fire safety rules in this community. This is a violation of Bylaw 12.3, outdoor combustion without authorization." Before I could say anything, the officer nodded and turned back to me. "No criminal infraction, sir. But I'd recommend reviewing the HOA guidelines carefully. Have a good day." And just like that, he drove off, leaving me face to face with Karen. She didn't yell. She didn't smile. She just stared at me and said, cold, deliberate, "This isn't over." She was right. It wasn't. It was just beginning. Monday morning, 800 am, I stepped outside with a mug of coffee. The mailbox was stuffed, not with coupons or welcome flyers. No, 3 thick envelopes, each stamped with the AOA's official seal like little bombs waiting to go off. Envelope 1, noise violation 300 fine. On Sunday at approximately 11:50 am, outdoor music at 847 Lakeshore Drive exceeded the 55 dB community limit. I blink. I'd been playing soft classic rock on a tiny Bluetooth speaker. Just to be sure, I pulled out my phone, opened the decibel meter app, 42 dB from the property line. Under any standard, that's quieter than a dishwasher. Envelope 2. Landscaping violation at 200 fine, grass height at 3.2 inches. Community limit is 3.0 inches. She measured my lawn with a ruler. I had mowed it 6 days ago. Envelope 3. Appearance violation, 400 fine. Exterior wood stain does not comply with approved HOA color palette. I laughed loudly. It was the original stain. The same one the previous owners had used for 15 years. The same one that had passed every HOA inspection until now. But Karen wasn't done. Not even close. Apparently, she'd spent her entire Sunday evening creating a personalized punishment plan. Parking violation and 150 for angling my car, non-regulation, in my own driveway. Signage violation 200 because my house numbers were the wrong font. Storage violation 175 for leaving a garden hose visible from the street. Total. For 425 in fines. For grilling ribs, I sat on my porch sipping coffee that no longer tasted like coffee, staring at this stack of madness. And I felt something I hadn't felt since walking away from my last corporate job. That crushing sensation of being trapped in someone else's unreasonable system. This was psychological warfare, plain and simple. Karen wanted to make my life so miserable, so financially painful, that I'd pack up and leave without a fight. And for a moment, it almost worked. Tuesday morning, the knockout punch arrived, a certified letter. Red stamped, fine el na fee, a utility disconnection warning. Failure to pay outstanding fines within 48 hours will result in termination of water and electric service per section 12.7 of community guidelines. 48 hours to pay 425 or live in the dark. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wood grain. This cabin was supposed to be my escape. My retreat, the reward for decades of hard work. Instead, I'd stumbled into a war zone run by a tyrant in designer heels. At 200 am, defeated, exhausted, I pulled up a real estate listing site. My heart sank as I typed, "Lake cabin for sale, motivated seller." The words felt like surrender. But what I didn't know then was that one quiet knock on my door would flip everything upside down. That knock came Wednesday morning. Old man Henderson stood on my porch holding 2 cups of coffee, a grim expression on his face. "Son," he said, "saw your listing online. We need to talk before you do something you'll regret." We sat on my deck in silence for a while, watching the morning mist rise off the lake. The same lake that had once calmed my soul now stirred something bitter in my chest. Henderson didn't say much at first, just handed me the coffee and stared across the water. Then finally, he said, "Then, that woman has been terrorizing this neighborhood for 5 years. You're not her first victim, but you might be the last if you play this smart." I wanted to believe him. But all I could think about were the numbers. 425 in fines, 48 hours to pay, threats to cut off my water and electricity. "Mr. Henderson," I sighed. "She's got the whole system wrapped around her finger. I can't win. I'm just one guy with a grill." That's when his eyes lit up, not with anger, not with pity, but with something like satisfaction. "She's obsessed with your cabin," he said quietly. That made me pause. "What?" Henderson leaned forward. Tried to buy it 3 years ago. Offered the Morrisons, Jim and Susan, double market price. They refused. Next thing you know, violation after violation. Same exact playbook she's using on you. I blinked. She harassed them too. Relentlessly. Henderson nodded. Holiday lights violations. Noise complaints for mowing the lawn. Petty nonsense. After 6 months of it, they packed up and moved to Arizona. She didn't just want the house, Ethan. She wanted it so badly she was willing to destroy anyone who stood in the way. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Suddenly, everything made sense. The aggression, the 9/11 call, the avalanche of fines. This wasn't about air quality or grass height. It was personal. It always had been. She thinks that house belongs to her, Henderson said. And when you bought it out from under her, that wasn't just a sale. That was war. For the first time since the sirens, I didn't feel powerless. I felt angry. And that anger gave me focus. I pulled the real estate listing offline that night and started digging. I had a background in data analytics, numbers, records, patterns. That's where the truth always hides. So I requested all financial records from the HOA for the past 3 years, something every homeowner has a legal right to do. Karen, predictably, stonewalled. First, she claimed the records were being reviewed by the accounting team. Then she said they were digitizing the documents and they'd be temporarily unavailable. Finally, she insisted all requests required full board approval. That's when I quoted state law, specifically the HOA Transparency Act, and threatened to escalate the matter to the County Oversight Committee. 3 hours later, I had the files. What I found shocked even me. Over the past 24 months the HOA had paid $65,000 to a company called Lakeside Solutions for community maintenance. The invoices were extensive: dock repairs and structural maintenance, 30,000 lighting upgrades and repairs, on 15,000 landscaping maintenance, more 12,000 drainage improvements, or 8,000. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The dock, falling apart, rotting wood, rusted bolts, unsafe, streetlights, half affected or didn't work at all. Landscaping, looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. Drainage, one rainstorm and the streets turned into swamps. So where was the $65,000? A quick search of the county business registry gave me the answer. Lakeside Solutions was registered to one Karen L. Mitchell. Business address: her home. Karen had been funneling HOA funds into her own pocket, billing the community for maintenance that either wasn't done, or done so poorly it may as well not have been done at all. It wasn't just harassment now. It was fraud. Theft. And it had been happening under everyone's nose for years. But the rabbit hole went deeper. Buried in a folder marked Miscellaneous Correspondence, I found emails from 2 years ago. Between Karen and Jim Morrison. The same Jim Morrison who used to own my cabin. Karen had emailed him multiple times, offering above market cash for the house. When he politely declined, her tone shifted. One email read, "If you're not willing to sell, I understand. But I'd hate for unresolved violations to create unnecessary friction with the HOA." Another, even more chilling: the HOA board has been exploring community development uses for lakefront properties. Just something to keep in mind. She tried to use the HOA to force a sale. Eminent domain. For a personal grudge. That was it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to protect my home. I was going to expose her. And if the community backed me, I was going to end her reign. Permanently. Karen still thought she could outmaneuver me. She assumed I'd come crawling to her with an apology, a check, maybe a resignation from the community altogether. She didn't know I'd found the emails, the invoices, the registration documents. She didn't know that I'd been quietly assembling something far more powerful than revenge. Proof. I called for an emergency HOA meeting under Section 4.2 of our bylaws, the clause that allows any homeowner to request a special session in the case of financial discrepancies or board misconduct. Karen, predictably, tried to shut it down. "You're not eligible to call meetings," she told me in a dismissive email. "You're still within your 90-day new resident probation period." Except I wasn't. And even if I had been, the bylaw she cited didn't exist. I replied with a scanned copy of the actual rules, highlighted, annotated, and attached with a summary for the rest of the board. I CC'd every homeowner in the neighborhood. The trap was set. Reluctantly, Karen issued the meeting notice. Thursday, 7:00 p.m. Lakeside Estates Community Center, Thursday evening. The community center was packed. I hadn't seen this many people in one place since I moved in. There were retirees, young families, middle-aged couples sipping from travel mugs. People looked tense but curious. Karen entered like royalty, flanked by her loyalists. 3 older homeowners who had clearly benefited from her leadership. She wore a navy blue pantsuit and carried a thick folder that screamed intimidation. She marched up to the podium like it was her throne. "We're here tonight," she began, "because one resident has chosen to question the integrity of this board, and me, without cause. I want to address this directly, and then we can move on." Her voice dripped with authority. "Mr. Peterson has received multiple legitimate violation notices. Instead of accepting responsibility, he has decided to stir chaos. He's attacking the very system that keeps our property values high and our neighborhood safe." People nodded. Some even clapped. I could feel the tide rising against me. Karen continued, "He's even accused this board, me, of financial misconduct. But let me be perfectly clear, every dollar we spend goes into improving this community. To suggest otherwise is not only false, it's defamatory." A man from the back, Bob something, spoke up. "But the dock's still rotting. My kid got a splinter last week." Karen smiled condescendingly. "The dock is scheduled for phased renovations this fall. It's already been budgeted." "Yeah," someone else muttered. "For the third year in a row." But Karen pushed forward. "If we allow this kind of reckless accusation to dictate community leadership, we set a dangerous precedent. This neighborhood runs because we have rules, because we enforce them, and because we, your board, know what's best." She stepped back from the mic. The room was silent, and then, it was my turn. I walked slowly to the front of the room, calm, collected, no anger in my voice. "Thank you, Karen," I said. "And thank you all for coming." I connected my phone to the projector I'd tested earlier that afternoon. The screen lit up behind me. "I won't waste your time with accusations. Tonight, I'll show you facts." A slide went seen. An email dated March 15, 18 months ago, from Karen Mitchell to Jim and Susan Morrison. The text was clear. "I'd be willing to offer above market value for the cabin. We can avoid future violations if we can come to an agreement." Gasps. Slide 2. A timeline of HOA fines issued to the Morrisons in the months after they refused. Noise violations. Landscaping citations. Parking angles. The same template I'd received. She used her position to target them after they declined her offer. And when they moved to Arizona, I bought the house. So she started again. Slide 3. A business license. Lakeside Solutions. Registered to Karen L. Mitchell. At her home address. Slide 14. A list of checks issued from the HOA's account to Lakeside Solutions totaling $65,000. For dock repairs, lighting upgrades, landscaping, and drainage. I explained. "So let's take a look." Slide 50. Photos I'd taken that week. The dock, rotting and splintered. The lights, half of them broken. The drainage, still flooding every time it rained. The work was never done. But the payments were made. To her. People were murmuring. Karen's jaw was tight, her eyes wide. Every fine she issued, every threat of utility shut-off. It was all part of a system she built to maintain power and punish anyone who stood in her way. The Slide 60. HOA bylaws on financial accountability. Every homeowner has the right to review financial records. When I requested them, Karen delayed, redirected, and tried to shut me down. Why? I let the silence hang in the air. Because the more you dig, the more rot you find. Karen stood up, trembling. "This is a circus," she snapped. "He's twisting everything." "Then," explained the email, someone shouted. "Or the checks," said another. "I got fined for holiday lights." Someone yelled from the back. It was unraveling fast. Karen tried to regain control. "You people don't understand what it takes to run this place?" "No," I said. "We understand perfectly. You built a kingdom, and we let you rule. But the truth is, you weren't protecting property values. You were protecting your power." I turned back to the audience. "It's time we take it back." The crowd erupted. Some clapped. Others stood. Even her loyalists looked shaken. The meeting ended with a formal motion to suspend Karen Mitchell from the HOA board pending a full audit. The vote, 44-1. Only Karen voted no. As she stormed out of the room, folder clutched in hand, someone in the back muttered, "Karen just got Karened." And that's when I knew. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Karen's arrest shook the entire community. For years she'd ruled with impunity, barking orders, issuing fines, humiliating neighbors, all under the guise of protecting property values. But now the very person who once cited others for chipped paint or noisy wind chimes was on the front page of the local paper. For felony vandalism. The headline, "HOA president arrested for vandalizing neighbor's property. Entire meltdown caught on camera." Her mugshot was impossible to ignore. Wild hair, smeared mascara, eyes full of panic. A far cry from the composed tyrant everyone feared. Online, people called it the moment. Karen finally Karen too hard. But behind the jokes was something more profound. The community had seen the truth. In the days that followed, neighbors who used to stay quiet began speaking up. The dam had burst. An elderly couple down the street admitted paid over $800 in arbitrary fines for unauthorized fencing. Even though the fence had been there for 20 years, a single mother revealed how Karen had once sent code enforcement to her home twice in 1 week, just for leaving her trash bin at the curb a few hours late. Story after story surfaced. Harassment, intimidation, financial manipulation, but the most common sentiment. "I thought I was the only one." Karen had built her reign on isolation, making each victim feel alone, like they were the problem. But now, people realized they weren't alone. They had each other. That's when I knew. The real victory wasn't just Karen's downfall, it was our collective awakening. But something still gnawed at me. Karen was gone, stripped of her title, facing legal consequences. But the system that gave her power still remained. The HOA structure, the unchecked authority, the culture of fear and punishment. Even without Karen, someone else could rise to take her place. And so the idea hit me. Why not get rid of the HOA altogether? It sounded crazy at first. Radical. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I started doing the research, digging through state laws and HOA bylaws. And guess what? HOAs can be dissolved. It's rare, it's difficult, but it's possible, and completely legal in homeowner support. I ran the numbers. Each household paid $2,000 a month in HOA fees. That's $2,400 a year. With 50 homes, that's $120,000 annually. Karen had funneled $65,000 into her fake company, Lakeside Solutions, and in return, flickering streetlights, rotten docks, crumbling landscaping. I did a cost comparison by hiring a professional property management company for only essential services, trash pickup, snow removal, basic maintenance. We could cut costs to $50 a month per household. That's a $150 a month saving per family. The $90,000 back into residents' pockets every year. I put together a proposal, graphs, charts, a detailed breakdown. My goal wasn't just to save money. It was to give people their freedom back. To live without fear of a neighbor turned dictator inspecting your garden hose or measuring your lawn with a ruler. When I presented it to Henderson, he nodded slowly. You might just change everything, son. And I was ready to try. I called for an emergency meeting, originally intended to elect a new HOA board after Karen's removal. But I had something bigger in mind. Tuesday evening. The Lakeside Estates Community Center. Every chair was full. People came expecting a simple election. What they got instead was a revolution. I stood at the front and took a deep breath. Before we vote on new leadership, I want to ask a question. What if we didn't need any? Gasps, murmurs, raised eyebrows. I clicked the remote. A projection screen lit up behind me, showing the financials, the savings, the plan, the possibility. What if we hired a simple service to handle trash and snow, and trusted ourselves to handle everything else like reasonable adults? I saw curiosity turning into hope. One woman stood up. But what about rules? What about property values? I smiled. Did Karen's rule make this a better place to live? Or did it make people feel like prisoners in their own homes? Henderson rose from the back. I've lived here 40 years. There was a time when neighbors helped each other instead of policing each other. I say we go back to that. Applause broke out. A few hesitant at first, then more. The vote. 47 to dissolve, 3 to keep. Lakeside Estates HOA was no more. As the meeting ended, someone brought in BBQ from a local diner. Henderson handed me a plate and said with a grin, "You started a BBQ war and ended up starting a revolution." I laughed. But he was right. From one 9/11 call to a community reborn, it was the most satisfying meal I'd ever had. Friday morning arrived with eerie stillness. No violation letters in my mailbox. No clipboard-toting tyrant pacing across my lawn. No 9/11 calls over barbecue smoke. For the first time since I moved in, I felt peace. But Henderson knocked on my door just after breakfast, holding a cup of coffee and a warning. "Son," he said, "I've seen folks like Karen before. There are two kinds of people who lose power. Those who accept it, and those who burn everything down on their way out. Karen's the second kind." He was right. Over the weekend, Karen went into meltdown mode behind the scenes. She made frantic phone calls to anyone who'd pick up. Former board members, city officials, even county code enforcement, trying to dig up anything she could use against me. She began posting fake reviews of my consulting business under burner accounts. She spread rumors online that I was destroying community values. But that was just the beginning. On Monday, the threats turned personal. First came anonymous notes slid under my door. "You think you won? This isn't over. You ruined everything good about this place. Watch your back." Then came the late-night phone calls. One ring, then silence. I changed numbers. She found the new one within 24 hours. She started driving by my cabin several times a day. Sometimes she'd just sit at the end of my driveway, engine running, staring. It was legal, but terrifying. And when I floated the idea of proposing we dissolve the HOA entirely, just a casual comment to a neighbor, Karen snapped. That same night, I got a particularly disturbing message, scrawled on notebook paper and shoved under my doormat. "You want barbecue freedom? I'll leave you fire to burn it all." That was the moment I installed perimeter security cameras. Thursday, 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected on the camera. I opened the feed groggily, expecting a raccoon. But the figure on screen wasn't an animal. It was Karen, former HA president, community watchdog, suburban tyrant, holding a golf club. What followed was pure chaos. She started smashing my patio furniture like a deranged PGA player trying to break the course record for destruction. The glass table shattered. Chairs flew. My propane grill was kicked over and dented beyond repair. Then she grabbed the hose and began soaking everything. Cushions, wooden decking, the furniture, ranting under her breath. The security mic picked it all up. If I can't have this place, nobody can. You want to destroy what I built, I'll destroy what you have. As she yanked flowers from the boxes my girlfriend had planted, flung them toward the lake, and then pulled out spray paint. In jagged red letters across the front of my cabin, she wrote, GEO OOT. And beneath it, smaller, this could have been avoided. Then she looked directly into the camera. For a moment, I saw her face, not triumphant, not defiant, but lost, unraveled. As she turned to leave, she tripped. The deck soaked from her own vandalism, and landed hard. Her golf club clattered across the boards, and as she staggered up, she left something behind, a monogrammed scarf. Gold-stitched, with a single K, Friday, 8:30 a.m. I called the police. Officer Martinez, the same one Karen had called over my BBQ weeks ago, watched the footage without a word. This is clear-cut, he said. Vandalism, trespassing, destruction of property. She's gonna jail. By noon. Karen was in handcuffs, escorted out of her house in front of a dozen neighbors. The woman who spent 5 years enforcing arbitrary rules with an iron fist was now facing felony charges for a meltdown caught on camera. Her mugshot hit the local paper. Social media lit up. Captions like, "When Karen goes too far. This is what happens when you call 911 on BBQ." But for me, the most important part wasn't her downfall. It was the opportunity to end the entire system that created her. The community center had never been this full. People came early, folding chairs in hand, thermoses under arm, eyes full of anticipation. Some came for drama, some came for justice. But most came for hope. I stood at the front of the room, no longer the new guy, no longer the target. Now I was a voice, one they were ready to hear. Tonight, I began, we're not voting for a new board. We're voting on whether we need a board at all. Gasps, whispers. Then silence. I pulled up my presentation, a clean, simple to 200 HOA fees, Kill 50 private management, go 150 in savings month annual community savings, the 90,000. Why are we paying this much? I asked, for a system that gave us 5 years of fear, fines, and corruption. I showed the financial audit, the maintenance bills Karen faked. The broken lights, rotted dock, non-existent landscaping. Then I played the final card, a video interview with Jim Morrison, the previous owner of my cabin. We didn't sell because the house was bad, Jim said. We sold because Karen made us feel like we didn't own it. The room was silent. One by one, neighbors stood up. A woman from the end of the street. Karen fined me, 100 for leaving my trash can out 30 minutes too early. An older man, she made me repaint my fence twice over a shade difference. A young couple. We were told we couldn't own a large dog here. Stories poured out, years of fear, resentment, powerlessness, all finally being voiced. I raised one final question. Do we keep this system, or do we reclaim our freedom? Ballots were passed out. 2 options: keep the HOA, dissolve it. Replace with basic community management, drop their vote into the same wooden box Karen had once used to control elections. Now it would bury her empire. The results: 47 votes to dissolve, 3 to keep, overwhelming. Absolute. Cheers erupted. People hugged. Some wept. For the first time in 5 years, this wasn't a place ruled by fear. It was a neighborhood free to be a community again. That night I stood on my deck, grill smoking, ribs sizzling, the same scene Karen once tried to criminalize. Now, that smoke wasn't a violation. It was freedom rising into the air. 6 months after the HOA was dissolved, Lakeside Estates was no longer a neighborhood ruled by fear. It had become something rare and beautiful. A real community. People smiled when passing each other. Laughter replaced surveillance. The scent of grilled food floated freely in the air, no longer considered a violation, but a celebration of freedom. No one spoke of the Karen era with fear anymore. They spoke of it as a reminder that once freedom is reclaimed, it must be protected. Karen's house sold quietly 3 months after her arrest. No farewell, no goodbyes. Just a moving truck pulling away in silence. On the patch of land where her office of power used to stand, the community came together to plant a garden. Sunflowers, tomatoes, mint, and herbs anyone could pick and share. They called it the Freedom Garden. Everyone pitched in. One person built the trellis. Another watered the beds. Someone hand-painted wooden signs for each plant. No one gave orders. No one needed to. It just worked, naturally, joyfully, and without control. Every Sunday, I light the grill again. On the very deck Karen tried to destroy. Neighbors bring sides, fresh fruit, a couple of beers. We tell new stories. We laugh louder than ever. And no one worries whether they're standing at a regulation angle. We didn't just defeat Karen. We freed ourselves from a system designed to control. Now, every time I watch the smoke rise from the grill, I think back to that first BBQ. The one that led Karen to call 911 over air pollution. In a strange way she did me a favor. She reminded me that freedom doesn't mean the absence of conflict. Freedom means having the courage to say, enough. And that's when a new kind of community was born. If you've made it this far, from the first 911 call to the Freedom Garden, thank you. This wasn't just a story about a corrupt OA president. It was about power, resilience, and what happens when one person decides to fight back, not just for themselves, but for an entire community. If you've ever felt trapped in a system that didn't make sense, if you've ever been bullied by bureaucracy or silenced by fear, then maybe this story was yours too. And if it gave you hope, even just a little, do me a favor. Hit that like button so more people find this message. Drop a comment. What would you have done if Karen was your neighbor? Subscribe for more stories like this. Stories where justice wins, and freedom finds a way. Because sometimes the biggest change starts with a backyard BBQ. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to say, this ends now. Thank you for being part of this journey. And if you're ready for the next story, I'll see you in the next video.